Hi, thank you all for coming and joining us at this live reading. I'm Alethea Lyons, and I have some wonderful fantasy and horror people with me. As you can see, we are 4 people. We were 6 people, and I can do that maths. So we had one person who sadly had to drop out due to some personal circumstances, and we're just missing one. So he's just being mysterious, and hopefully he will show up at some point. He volunteered to go first. So we're just pure chaos this evening, basically. So Amanda, who asked to go somewhere in the middle, is now going to go first with her debut that's coming out next August, which I have now read, I think, 4 times, probably, and I'm sure there'll be a 5th.
Yes.
We're thorough.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy it enough to have read it 4 times, so hopefully that says a good thing about the book. But I will hand over to you.
All right. Thank you. I am not reading from chapter 1. I'm actually going to read from chapter 3. So just a little bit of context. My main character, Clara, is a criminal psychologist, and she is taking one of her patients who she's a little bit obsessed with. She's kind of helping her escape into the woods from the institution where she was located. And an owl has just flown past in front of their car. So here we go. It's just an owl, Juliana said, but a shiver ran through Clara. She turned the heat up in the car. The creature's black eyes were empty, as though all the shadows of the night stared at her through a mask. Clara tore her gaze away. Just an owl, and pressed the Subaru into a faster stumble, her back arched forward away from the seat, a pointless fear response. Heat rose in her cheeks, embarrassment at her inability to experience awe at the sight of such a thing. Instead, a growing sense of dread crawled up from the depths of her gut. The shadowy trees pressed in further, making her wonder, not for the first time, what the hell she was doing out here in the middle of the wilderness as the sun slid further and further below the horizon. I think I should maybe take you. No. The single syllable was firm and solid, a gavel sliding down between them. Clara flinched, and Juliana's face softened. I can't go back there. You don't know what it was like. This is good for me. Exposure therapy, like you said. She turned to gaze out the passenger side window again, at the trees sliding past in blurs of dark green and black, her hand pressed against the glass, fingers splayed wide. The road opened up into a clearing on the right, just big enough for 3 or 4 cars to park. Clara eased into one of the parking spots. A fresh signpost hung straight ahead, bright white paint marking the broken path trailhead. She took a steadying breath, reminding herself the owl sighting was a beautiful experience, not a creepy one. Since when did she become so jumpy? Maybe since you broke someone out of a mental institution, she thought. She swallowed back the bile that rose in her throat. Out here, they were entirely alone. The loneliness she'd felt inside her for the past 4 months now surrounded her on all sides. Something real, solid, that would never leave her. A voice swirled through the car, nothing more than a whispered promise, a memory, forever. He'd said it to her so many times, their fingers, bodies, lives intertwined, and now he was gone, leaving nothing but a cold, dark hole in the space he'd filled for decades. The mechanical clunk of Juliana's door opening brought Clara back to the present. A chill filled the car as Juliana stepped out into the forest. She turned back with a sad smile before inhaling deeply. Feels like just yesterday I was here with Gavin, starting our hike. Come on, she said. I'll show you the trail. Clara gazed down the path in front of her. Only about 8 feet of it was illuminated by her headlights before it turned to the left and disappeared into the shadows. Isn't it a bit late? She asked. It's already getting dark. We came all this way, Juliana said. Come on. Come, come, come. The word echoed around Clara like dry leaves in the wind. Slowly, haltingly, as though learning a new dance, she unbuckled her seatbelt, pulled the lever, and swung the door open. She stumble-stepped out into the cold, her skin instantly tightening around her, breath catching. It was unseasonably cold, or maybe it was the altitude. It's the chill of fear, she thought. But fear probably wasn't necessary here, she reminded herself. The bear that attacked Gavin probably would have started hibernating by now. There was nothing here but harmless trees and darkness, beautiful owls, silent nights, soulless. What happened to me wasn't wildlife. Juliana's voice floated back to her from up the trail where the woman stood like a specter, illuminated by the headlights in front of a pitch black background. It was the Clara hurried behind her, hoping to catch the words lost in the wind. It was the what? I didn't hear you. Frozen mud crunched underfoot, and she slipped on the frosty tree roots and rocks. Her feet urged her forward, moving on their own accord, while her toes curled away from the cold. She wore simple flats, not having planned to go fucking hiking up a mountain at night. The insistent ding, ding, ding of her open door warning faded behind her as she scampered up the lighted section of trail. The wind blew, and a susurration made its way across the forest. Branch to branch, whispers and creaks moved closer, corporeal, insistent. It crescendoed, echoing like 100 discordant voices in Clara's head. She covered her ears with her stiff, frozen hands and turned back towards the car, but the trail behind was dark. When she spun back around, Juliana had vanished from view. Juliana? She called. Her voice sounded painfully quiet, as though the forest swallowed it whole. Juliana? No answer. Clara continued further up the earthy-smelling path, her impractical shoes slipping across the cold ground again, near frozen mud flowing over the low edges and leaking in to slick the area under the sole of her foot. Her toe caught on the edge of a rock and she tumbled, something sharp hammering into her knee. Ow! Juliana, where are you? We need to go. This was a bad idea. She stood again, slowly, gingerly, her pulse beating a rhythm in the fresh wound, the beginnings of a trickle down her shin. The space around her was black as pitch. How much time had passed? She could barely see her hand in front of her face. Where the fuck was Juliana? She couldn't just leave her in the middle of nowhere, but she couldn't stay in the freezing dark woods all night either. She turned in what she hoped was the right direction and stumbled down the trail. The whispers of the woods grew louder, nipping at her heels, a pack of wolves. They began to coalesce like scattered puzzle pieces, forming a picture of their own volition, and their collective yell pierced Clara's mind. Come! She ran faster. Come, come, come! A cloud cleared from in front of the sliver of moon, and in the faint silver light, she saw her Subaru sitting there, almost translucent, unreal. The door hung open, but the interior was black. She tumbled into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, grasping for the keys in the ignition, but coming away with only air. What? She whined, hands patting down all surfaces, reaching down to her footwell, poking into her pockets. Something pelted her driver's side window. Then another bang against the windshield. Suddenly, the car was surrounded by objects hammering into it. What the fuck? Clara paused in her frantic search to look up, only to see hundreds of wings beating against the windows, windshields, sunroof. She laid on the horn, hoping the blare of it would scare away the ravens, but they continued to batter against the car. A louder cracking bang beside her head as a beak hit the window there, then another. Her breath caught in her throat. She had to go. She couldn't wait here. Clara let out a sob and pressed the horn again. Maybe Juliana would hear it and come. Clara couldn't leave her here, abandoned in the cold of night. But where had she gone? Another crack on the windshield, and Clara saw a small chink in the glass, as though a pebble had been thrown against it at great speed. Another crack resounded against her driver's side window. Fuck, she hissed, reaching with frantic fingers into and under everything in search of her keys, until she noticed the jab in the back of her thigh. They were smashed underneath her the whole time. She retrieved them with shaking fingers. She knew she'd left them in the ignition, knew the headlights had been on. Hadn't they? Clara shook her head. She was really losing it now. She had to keep it together. Could this be Juliana's doing? Maybe she'd removed the keys and hid in the back seat as some kind of misguided prank? Clara cast a glance into the dark depths behind her, but saw nothing but crumpled papers and snack wrappers. The beating against the windows intensified, setting off a high-pitched whine in the back of Clara's throat. She shoved the keys in the ignition, turned over the engine, and sped back towards the highway, tires squealing as she tried to outrun her mind's image of Juliana's dark form on the trail, a flurry of owls and ravens surrounding her, eyes black as winter. The end. Thank you.
That's good.
Thanks.
Yay!
Your writing's always so lyrical and visual.
Oh, well, thank you, guys.
I love how unreliable Clara is, because I think, aside from breaking someone out of hospital, her reactions are very typical what most of us would actually do.
I'm glad to hear that, because I kind of feel like her driving away, even with everything, like the voices and the ravens, I'm like, would you really drive away and leave someone in the woods? I wouldn't, I don't think, but I think Clara would. So
Clara definitely would. You'd also have some plot problems if she stayed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Claire would, and then she'd justify why she did it.
Yeah. She's good at justifying things, though. That's her strong suit.
She is. She's brilliant in a complete disaster kind of way.
She is a complete disaster. Yes.
So we are going to move on to 0, which is our first 0 of the evening. We have 2 zeros, apparently. Completely coincidentally, although amusingly, my 0 hangs out with Jessica's 0 team sometimes online.
Yeah.
From a throwover that we used to do some character crossover interviews, and they started hanging out. So my 0 knows her zeros, even though they're from completely separate universes.
Yes.
And I have read this one in full quite recently because I blurbed for it, and it only came out in August.
Yep.
Yeah, August.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the end of August.
And I am a complete and utter wuss, so I can tell you that you can read this. It has some scenes, but it is not gratuitous, I think we'll go with. And it has a lot of romance as well, so we'll see which kind of tension we get tonight. I will hand over to Jessica.
Okay. So what I'm reading from is kind of in the middle-ish of the book. So at this point, we have the main character, Jeff, has been secretly recruited into some secret mercenary group of monster hunters, and he's been training exclusively with the main female character. And this is the first night he is meeting the rest of the team, and they want to haze him. So it's a little bit more dark humor than horror for this one.
I love this scene.
Oh, and I think there's cursing in this, just as a warning. Okay. Jennifer looked over at Jeff, who had managed to fall asleep. They were only on the road for about 15 minutes and he was out. It's funny how innocent people looked when they slept. Even the scariest individual in their group, Demon, looked so peaceful when he was dreaming. Jennifer had been surprised when she'd got the call from Hammer earlier, ordering her to rally the troops. Hammer had been back and forth between working with the team and his duties as head of the division. She had been delegating the gardening to Demon and Sentinel for the last 2 months, as well as the investigation of the attack 3 months ago. She'd probably separated everyone out too thin. This cemetery they were heading to was supposed to get checked once a month due to its size and location. Maybe she'd focused too much on Jeff. She pulled into the cemetery, noting the other 2 cars of her team members, a black Hummer and a black 1971 Chevrolet Chevelle. She pulled up behind them. Jeff was still snoring into her window. She punched him in the arm, laughing as he shot up, startled and awake. You know, Knight, you should have grabbed some coffee before you left the base. Wait, you guys have coffee there? I thought you were always ordering out when you brought it, he asked while yawning. Jennifer looked at him confused. We work under a bar. Yeah, I know, I'm just teasing, he chuckled as he rubbed his eyes. A cup of coffee would be worth its weight in gold right now. Come on, don't quit on me now. You'll be fine. She hopped out of the truck and placed her earpiece in her ear. There was a soft buzzing noise, followed by the murmur of her teammates' voices. She smiled coyly as Jeff sluggishly jumped out of the truck and followed her into the cemetery. You know, I remember when I first got introduced to the team after training. I couldn't sleep straight for a couple of weeks. Really? Yeah, once the shock value goes down, you'll have no problem with adrenaline spikes. She turned to see if he was relaxed. Jeff grimaced, and how long do you think that's going to take? Well, you know that will differ between people. For example, we had this one guy we tried to break in. He didn't sleep for 8 weeks, poor bastard. She glanced over at Jeff again as they walked. The color was fading from his face again. She listened carefully to their surroundings for anything that sounded out of place. This was a large area, but it was crowded with family plots that included grand mausoleums and very ornate giant headstones. Many places for reanimated corpses to lurk. Per Sentinel's report, they should still have time before there were any real activity. Jesus, how the hell did he function without going to a coma? Jennifer laughed at his question. Well, the brain does this funny thing of shutting down other functions when it gets the chance so the body can recuperate. Call it involuntary micronaps. Jennifer checked to see if he was still following. Anyways, this guy was suffering from them bad for a week, each nap getting progressively longer. You couldn't wake him up. So what happened to him? Did he ever get over it? Nope, he went MIA. Jennifer stopped walking. So he went batshit crazy. Awesome. As Jeff looked at the cemetery in front of them, Jennifer saw on his face that he was worried. That would be his worst fate. She grabbed his arm and turned him back to her so that she knew he understood what she was about to tell him. Zero operatives don't die night. They go missing in action. The hard truth, Zero does not exist, so when they die, they just disappear. He got devoured by a horde of zombies. He was asleep on his feet, never even felt them tearing out his insides. She watched as his face processed the horror of what she told him. She spun back around and began to walk again, holding her smile in so he wouldn't see. They approached the remaining team members. Jeff seemed lost in thought, still contemplating her story. She hoped she hadn't scared him too badly, but the payoff would be worth it. For her, at least. Demon was using one of the headstones as a small chair. No respect for whomever was buried there. He looked up and waved at them when they approached. Hey, Jeff, how you doing? You seem tired. Demon had a slight chuckle in his voice. Jeff didn't notice it. Yeah, man, you look like you haven't slept in a week. Don't space out like that last guy, you hear? Sentinel walked over to join their small group, his sandy blonde hair highlighted by the moonlight above them. Poor guy, he never saw it coming. Demon spoke with the weight to his words. Jeff's eyes were wide, his skin pale, and Jennifer was sure that Demon could hear Jeff's anxious heartbeat in his chest as he stared at all of them. She exchanged glances with Sentinel and Demon, confirming silently that Jeff had had enough. They burst out laughing. Oh my god, I can't believe you bought that bogus story. Sentinel leaned on Demon for support as his laugh bellowed out louder. You should have seen the look on your face. Demon wiped blood-red tears of laughter from his eyes. Jennifer remembered the first time she saw Demon cry blood. It was 5 years ago when he'd come to aid her, when Connor. She brushed off the thought. The Zero archive said it had something to do with the regenerative nature of their blood and the mutation of the tear ducts. A vampire with pink eye wouldn't be a good hunter. Jeff looked over at Jennifer, completely clueless as to how they were all cued in on this horrible joke. She simply pointed at her ear, where she had installed her communicator. Jeff's ears turned bright red again. Fuck you guys. His facial expressions were contorting through disbelief, anger, and embarrassment. Come on, Knight. You gotta have pretty thick skin for this, Jennifer smiled, as he continued to glare back at everyone. Relax. If you didn't think you could handle the joke, you never would have done it. Demon put his hand on Jeff's shoulder like a parent giving a talk down to a child. Yeah, you gotta learn to laugh at these moments if you want your head to stay together for this job. Sentinel chuckled. Jeff seemed to be calming down as his color returned. Hammer approached from the path behind them. Everyone immediately stood in line at attention. Good evening, everyone. Hammer addressed the group with a degree of brevity. I'd like to take this opportunity to have a moment of silence for our dearly departed Chet, missing in action, who, as you may remember, was devoured a year ago today by zombies while suffering from micronaps. Everyone chuckled except for Jeff. He was clearly uncomfortable, being the odd one out. She wasn't usually one for hazing, but knew this would have been better than anything that Hammer had planned for him. Her brother could be cruel with his humor. All right. Hammer called for order, still laughing himself. As all of you know, I'm a bit skeptical about bringing anyone from the outside into our crew, but Jen can vouch for him and personally assures me that he can handle anything we throw at him. So let's make sure to invite Jeff to sing Kumbaya around the campfire in our happy little circle jerk. Why can't you be serious for 5 minutes, Terrence? Jeff, I'm assuming you've been introduced to everyone. Hammer turned his attention to Jeff, who stood very rigid. She had never seen him so nervous. Sir, yes, sir, he hollered back like he was in a Marine boot camp. Hammer hated formalities. Oh, Christ, Hammer roughed up his already scruffy light brown hair and spit on the ground. Unless I'm your spiritual advisor or sleeping with your mama, you can call me Hammer or Commander Hammer if you must be formal. That sir shit's gotta go. Yes, sir. Hammer glared at him as the words left his lips. I mean, yes, Hammer. If you couldn't tell, we're a pretty informal unit. As long as everyone involved pulls their weight and watches each other's backs, we're all happy pandas. Hammer patted Jeff as if saying, good talk, and returned his attention to the rest of the group. Okay, people, this is going to be a routine gardening expedition. Sector we haven't hit in a while. There are some buggers here that don't want to stay in the ground. Ought to do just fine to break in the new guy. Apparently he likes to shoot paintball guns at cardboard cutouts of zombs. The group chuckled quietly. Jennifer glanced over at Jeff, who was shifting his weight awkwardly. She elbowed Sentinel in the rib to cut it out. He looked at her surprised, and she mouthed to him, enough. Sentinel frowned and passed a message on to Demon. She watched his Demon lean back a little to get her in his line of sight. He raised an eyebrow at her. She gave him an icy stare back. He stopped laughing immediately and stood back straight. Hammer continued to lecture on like he hadn't noticed the exchange. We're using live ammo tonight, so Jeff, try not to shoot us in the face as it might take the sunshine out of our evening. Everyone, for Pete's sake, call your shots. This place isn't best lit, so staying out of the line of fire is critical. Everyone nodded but unenthusiastically. This was not new information for them. Hammer was making a show of Jeff, and it was starting to annoy her too. All right, people, let's get ourselves locked, cocked, and ready to rock. Let's reconvene over here at the mausoleum gates in about 20 minutes. The group dispersed to their separate vehicles to get their gear together. Jennifer walked with Jeff back to her truck. Hey, I'm sorry about that. We may have taken a little too far. She walked quietly by his side as she waited for a response. Jeff shrugged. Nah, it's all right. The group I get, but what's up with Hammer? It's not like it's really my first day anymore. He was really laying into me. He peeked over his shoulder, making sure no one else was listening. Don't mind him. He's just busting your balls a little because you're our ranking FNG. Jennifer trailed off at the end when she realized what she was about to say. Oh, stupid Jennifer. This is not going to make things better with him and the group. This is why we don't talk with the rookies. You're what? It's our acronym for fucking new guy, she muttered quickly. Hammer comes off like a hard ass, but once you get to know him, he's a teddy bear, I swear. Great. Can't wait. Jeff picked up his pace when they approached her truck. He quietly fumed as he walked to the back. He opened the bed hatch hastily, pulling out one of the duffel bags and sliding it within her reach, all the while refusing to make eye contact, and silently retrieved his own gear. Jennifer had seen him scared or nervous, but never really angry, except when she got him to talk about his father. She tried to think of what to say as she stood next to him. This was partially her fault. He pulled out 4 magazines for their M1911s and placed them on the door hatch and hurriedly grabbed the hunting knife out of its sheath, sliding it into the sheath on his vest. Jennifer handed him his handgun and he loaded it with one of the 4 magazines. He slid another into the empty space on his vest. After holstering his gun, he handed the remaining magazines to her roughly, then dug through the bag and pulled out their 2 large mag lights. She liked that they were heavy, so they worked well as clubs if ammo became sparse. Jennifer rattled her brain for how to end this ancient silence. He said he wasn't mad at her, but the hazing was her idea. She took a deep breath to start her apology when she heard him chuckle. To think, I'm here now because Adam pressured me into coming to that paintball game. I never would have imagined this turn of events. Why did Adam have to pressure you to come? Was it your ex? He seemed like he was trying to figure out what to say as his eyes looked at everything except her. Yeah, you remember that phone call. Yeah, she was a real bitch. Jennifer could see that he was still glum. Sorry, though being part of a secret organization with government ties has its perks. I wasn't lying when I told you I could ruin her life. She smiled at him playfully as she elbowed his ribs, so he could see she wasn't serious. He let a small sigh and returned the smile back. Thanks, I needed that. He pulled the communicator out of his vest and popped it in his ear. Well, if you ever want to talk about it, you can confide in me. Jennifer reached out and touched his arm gently. Thanks, Jeff smiled. He lingered a moment before removing his arm from her touch and tossed the duffel bags back in the truck. The remaining items made a loud clunk as the metal in the bags collided with the bed of the truck. She heard the static in her ear as her earpiece began receiving a signal again. ETA Phoenix, remember, rollout is in 5, Hammer's voice bellowed. Copy, we're on our way, just having a little chat. She gave a reassuring smile to Jeff. She wasn't going to let them bother him anymore. They began their walk back. Does the baby need you to hold his hand when he pulls the trigger too? Jeff's jaw dropped as he gaped at Jennifer. She wasn't surprised by his reaction to Hammer. Despite his misgivings, Hammer was actually a good leader if you can get past his bullshit. Hey, go easy, Terrence. This isn't a closed channel, and he already thinks you don't like him. She was getting annoyed by her adopted brother's behavior. Maybe he's smarter than I thought, Hammer chuckled. If he's got an issue, get him a tissue. Now get your asses back here. 1 minute late to roll it, and I'll make a burnt cookie out of the rookie. Over and out. The static died in her earpieces. Yeah, real nice guy. Jeff marched forward angrily to their destination. The rest of the walk back was in silence. Jennifer was livid with Hammer, and if he didn't let up on Jeff tonight, this would be his last day as commander because he would be leaving the cemetery in a body bag. She followed Jeff as they walked off the side of the mausoleum and waited with him. He was tense, his muscles flexed as tight as he crossed his arms, tapping his foot anxiously. Jennifer scanned the area around him. There were more multi-family mausoleums to the west, large structures with shells for multiple bodies covered by stone nameplates. To the east were more individual burial sites. Tactically, it was more open and better to operate in. Jeff would do better if she could go with him that way. The moonlight grew brighter as she looked up. Thick clouds slowly swam across the sky. It wasn't a bad-looking night. She checked her watch. For all the rushing Hammer did, he still hadn't come back yet. When Jeff noticed Hammer's approach, he walked off to where Demon sat instead. You remember a party favor for our stray dog? Hammer asked her while he flicked his cigar ash to the ground. Jennifer made sure he could see her scowl as she pulled the silencer and laser sight attachment out of her side pack. Sure he doesn't need training rails? Be nice. Where's the fun in that? This is going to be a long night. That's it.
Yay! I love their chemistry, or sometimes lack of chemistry to each other.
Yeah, Hammer's a dick.
Oh yeah, completely.
I appreciate, and Amanda can vouch for me, that I just used the Michelle Rodriguez gif this last week because
Yes.
it's just like, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love all, like, this definitely has Michelle Rodriguez in
This is Michelle Rodriguez as a man.
vibes. Yes.
Like if you move to the side just so we can see, you've got the image there behind as well.
Oh, wait, recover?
Just that. Not to the side.
And I should say Jessica does all her own artwork as well, so she's doubly talented.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And as you can see, we are now 5.
Yay.
Just strolling in here.
Sorry about my delay. I was a little caught up by technical difficulties.
We understand. I mean, how many of us since 2020 have just been sitting on calls going, we can't hear you, we can't see you.
I'm not a cat.
Yeah, if we can just get some of the cats or dogs through, it'd be perfect. So you were going to go first, so we're going to let you go now. Just so you know, Amanda and Jessica have already gone. So we're going to have
sounds
some
good.
of Seeds of War, I think.
Yep.
Shall has
Yeah, this is for my debut novel, Seeds of War, and I'm not gonna start with the first chapter or the second one. It's gonna be the first chapter for one of my 3 POV characters. Its name is Red Now, and he's a bit of an older guy, and I think you're gonna be able to pick that up from the book and from what I'm gonna read. Yeah.
I love how
And by
various
the way,
people
this
last
is
time went, I'm going to read something at the beginning, and everyone this time is just going like, no, we're not doing that. We're chaos. We shall hand over to you to hear.
Okay, sounds good. And I'll just get started then. This is chapter 6, and it's called Powerful Smoke. Red Now pat his shades growl in the flank and let the pine head take the beast away. You walk to the top of the hill where the otherwise green valley below was speckled with brown and dark spots, the Leith warriors. They had reached the hill before the enemy. 500 warriors or so stood banging their weapons on their shields and facing the bottom of the valley from where the enemy soldiers would have to come. Leith, they bellowed. Leith, Leith. Red Now turned around, and the light count revealed another 500 warriors behind him, hiding. To his right, another 500 stood, hiding at the top of the hill. You're going to breathe the smoke, aren't you? Rebma's voice insisted on pestering him, even in the most important of moments. Haven't you had enough? Red Now swallowed and lightly touched the satchel in his belt, where he kept his ominous Ka's herbs. Not quite yet, he whispered to the ghosts. The smoke had been the bane of his existence and the solution to his problems all the same. He was a child when the crown smokesmiths of Shari first got hold of him. They shoved him in a locked chamber along with other urchins and filled the room with the smoke of their burning herbs. Kingdoms always needed fewer urchins and more smokesmiths, and the latter were always keen on turning others into what they were. Red Now still remembered well the other kids choking on the smoke, scratching the wood door to get out, screaming for help. In the end, they had all dropped dead on the stone floor, where Red Now had stayed on his feet, having breathed the smoke and remained alive to tell the story. His triumph had the smokesmiths doing their best to make him one of them. With access to the king's deep pockets, they gave him riches, the best food, and the best wine. Most kids couldn't resist, and by the time they were adults, they had bought into the entire system. Even as a child, Red Now had known he would always be a weapon to them, not a man. So he learned how to breathe the smoke safely, how to wield weapons, how to cultivate the herbs, and when to burn them. And then he escaped, a smokesmith who didn't serve the king or a lord, the rogue they called him. But he traveled far and wide without ever being caught, and his reputation took a darker turn, the blood collector. He trained day and night to protect himself and others like him, now the epitome of what he had done, what he had done sprawled before him in these foothills. Thousands of soldiers at his command, but old men did not live long, especially not with their lungs rotten by all the years of smoke inhalation. Attempting to breathe it again could very well kill him, but it was a risk he had to take. "You've always loved risks," the voice of his sister said. He shook his head, focusing on the battlefield. Everything was in place. Murray commanded the front line, Telwyn was in charge of the flank, and his attack and his blood sleuths hid behind on the western foothill. It was mid-morning when the constant thumping echoed in the distance. These thuds became clearer, and soon the first lines of the Nohani army appeared. The standard-bearer carried the Nohani flag, colored in dark, with a silver half-crescent in the middle. Thousands of soldiers poured through the valley and halted, maintaining distance. Without the eastern and southern garrisons in sight, the Leith looked outnumbered, but Rednow wasn't concerned about that. He worried more about the potion the secret potion these people were drinking that made them look like animals and act like animals. Once the Nohani soldiers were all lined up at the foothill, the Leith warriors started banging their weapons into their shields again. Leith, Leith, Leith. A war horn echoed, and the enemy charged, soldiers bellowing. They carried spears, and their heavier armors didn't allow for fast charge. The muddy grass under their feet even less so, and Rednow smiled. If he got what he wanted, they would be tired by the time they reached the Leith's first line. "Steady," Murray shouted and held the last vowel. They didn't move an inch. "Spears," she said. Those in the front lines planted their feet and flexed their legs, holding their long spears forward, pointing right at the charging army. "Shield wall," she bellowed. The Leith warriors got their large shields stuck in the mud and hid behind them, leaving only the spears poking out. That should deter the fast charge. The Nohani army still marched with heavy feet, no longer shouting, and the initial momentum lost. But there were many of them. Rednow just wanted to see it, the potion. He kept his eyes focused on the soldiers at the back of the line, in case there was any trick or any unexpected play. Arrows. A row of about 30 archers rose and pulled arrows into their bows, arms tense, waiting for the sign. Release. A volley of arrows flew and landed on the Nohani soldiers, who had been caught in the muddy grass. About a dozen of them fell dead, others suffered wounds. So far, the Leith had been well organized. Then, how had an average soldier such as the Nohani units been able to inflict such damage to his warriors in previous battles? The Leith's shield wall resisted as the Nohani tried to break through. Many of the soldiers got caught up by the Leith's spears before they were able to reach the shields. It didn't feel like a real attempt at defeating the Leith. It felt like they're stalling, he realized. He glanced at the horizon and searched for signs of an ambush. There it was, on the western side. A group of Nohani soldiers dressed in dark uniforms started engaging with one of the Leith's hidden flanks. "Shit! Telwyn," he bellowed. Telwyn saw it too. She quickly organized her units into a defensive formation, with shields and spears poking out, but it just wasn't enough time to do it right. Unlike the first batch, these Nohani bastards were not charging at a slow pace, and not uphill either. They raced with eagerness. There was something odd about them, something that almost reminded Rednow of himself. He had to take a closer look. He opened his herb satchel, removed the cords, and looked for a handful of his ominous chaos herbs. He clamped the crushed leaves on his palm and opened his hands. He then doused the leaves with a drop of belly foil, blew on them, and then started burning. The smoke that came from the herbs was different, and it followed Rednow instead of simply dissipating, searching for his nostrils, eager to be inhaled. Rednow allowed the smoke to engulf him. One breath only, he thought. He filled his chest with the foul smoke. It was tainting, his lungs eating at him, his eyes burned, turning red. But he still held the smoke. Only smokesmiths could do such a thing. He felt the smoke from the ominous cause increase his blood flow as it rushed inside his veins. His heart pumped faster. He could sense his lungs expanding, and he drew even more of the smoke. Not all herbs gave Smokesmith the same powers, and everyone's bloodline reacted differently to the smoke, but he had found Ominous Cast to be his favorite. Once he was in control of his new strength, he willed this transformation. His fingers grew into dagger-like claws, and all his skin hardened. Thorns emerged from his back, ripping his clothes, turning him into a beast, the Blood Collector. Some Smokesmiths became faster, others had special abilities depending on their bloodlines, but this one suited Rednow best. He ran towards the incoming Nohani soldiers. With no warning, Rednow's lungs ached, and he coughed in despair, unable to stop. His insides contracted and tortured him. He had used too much smoke, and for too damn long. He felt blood on his tongue, and spat it out, but kept going. He ran like the monster he was, and the smoke followed. Thrashing through the battlefield, he dwarfed both of the Leith warriors and the Nohani soldiers. He needed to get close and observe. Some of the enemies drank from a vial, which they tossed onto the mud while their comrades were already charging, swords and spears in hand. Rednow was used to the enemy fleeing as they saw him in that form, but these did the opposite. With raging eyes and snarling faces, they charged at him, as though only the moment mattered, not the future. Something is off with them. One of these strange Nohanis struck, sending a Leith warrior to the ground with ease. He looked just like a regular soldier, but he charged as though he was as large as Rednow. All confidence and bluster. It didn't help that there was a dozen more of them. Telwyn, we have to strike first, abandon the defensive position, finish them before more of them drink the potion. Telwyn's eyes widened as she saw him in that monstrous form, but there was no time for fear or concern. She bellowed commands, and the western flank warriors shuffled just before the Nohani struck with a force unlike any Rednow had ever seen from foot soldiers. Weapons slashed, helmets clashed, and shields flew. Still followed by the tainted smoke, both curse and cure, Rednow jumped into the middle of the Nohani berserkers. It didn't matter that they looked human. These were monsters like him. Rednow tensed his fingers and used his claws, craving them deep in a berserker's neck. He kicked another and another. Telwyn, he needed to protect her and her units. Retreat, cover Marae, and I will handle these. Telwyn hesitated, but gave the order, and her units fell back. The Nohani tried to give chase, but Rednow blocked their way. They weren't thinking. They were all snarls and hate. Their eyes were red and their veins about to burst. Rednow would have wished for more time to analyze them and the potion, but this was war, and he was the Blood Collector. He could not lose. He kicked at another berserker, his sword causing nothing but scratches on his hardened skin and bones. Rednow turned to face more. There were 10 of them now turned on him. He let them come all at the same time. When they were close, he charged at one, grabbed his arms, and snapped them in half. He grabbed another's head. It fit neatly into his palm, and simply flicked his wrist, breaking his neck. The berserkers kept on coming, as though seeing their comrades dying elicited no emotions. Rednow kept at them. He would end this without any more of the Leith warriors getting injured. Another whiff of the smoke. His lungs burned as though they were being sliced open from the inside, pain spreading inside his chest. A berserker jumped at his back and latched onto his neck, trying to find an opening to slit his throat. Rednow took hold of his head, pulled him down to the ground, and squeezed his face until his bones popped. The battlefield was carnaged, and he wavered. He was too old for this, too hurt, but Telwyn needed his help. This was a job that needed done. 3 swords had hit him hard enough to remain attached to his skin, where Rednow barely felt them. He noticed the berserkers didn't seem to feel any pain either. Unless he hit them with a killing blow, they thrashed and crashed until their bodies no longer allowed. Another latched onto his leg, trying to slice his heel. He was a monster, yes, but he alone would not be able to defeat an entire army of men and women enhanced like this. He kept fighting with punches and elbows, piercing them with claws, stomping on them. While he had the smoke, he would thrive. The problem was afterwards. The burn in his lungs slowed his breathing. Only the gods knew when the Blood Collector was going to die, but he reckoned he was well past testing his luck. A volley of arrows landed where he was. 3 of them hit him, 1 on the shoulders, 2 in the thighs. He looked around as the rest of the berserkers had been wiped out by the projectiles. With a look back, he saw Telwoon and gave her a nod before he ripped his arrows from his skin. All around him, the rest of the Nohani formation was in tatters, others surrendering. Telwoon nodded back and held her arms in the air, one pointing at the sky, another parallel with the earth, an L for Leith. The Leith was victorious. Red now willed his transformation back to his normal form, but soon dropped to his knees, hands in his chest. There was no cure for this kind of pain. As he glanced at the ground, he picked up a vial that still looked full. It was small, and a silver liquid flowed inside. Red now grabbed it. And that's the chapter 6.
Yay. You do the most incredible world building. I'm always so impressed with all the details
you.
that you have in there. And that's
Thank you.
one of
This is
3 you have out in this series?
the one of the 3 POVs, yeah. Or you
One of
mean
the
like
3 books. So there's Seeds of War, and then there's 2 others out in the series as well?
Oh yeah, so I got so Seeds of War is book 1. So chronologically, it's not the first one. So in terms of the series and the world itself, there's the prequel called The Ruins of Smoke. And then I did book 1, which is Seeds, and then I did book 2, which is The Thorns of War, which I released in May of this year.
I heard you read from the prequel last year at FantasyCon, which was fantastic as well. You do such good battle scenes.
Thank you. That's what I like the most. So I feel like it's the part that I like. It's kind of what I write for, to be honest. Yeah.
Sometimes writers are really messed up. We love the battle scenes. We love the things where horrible stuff happens to our characters.
Yeah. It's kind of weird therapy. It's like, how would I react if I was on a battle scene? Like, I would probably not react like any of these characters, but I would like to think I would.
I would love to see you Hulk out in the middle, just like, that would be very impressive.
Yeah.
I love that it was an army of berserkers. Because, like, one's bad, but an army of them, you're like, oh.
Yeah. I think it's yeah. What's that?
Go on.
No, I was just saying it's to sort of like set the scene for how the battles would turn out in the rest of the book, like later on. And it's like, this is just a little appetizer in the beginning of the book, and then, at the end of the book, the ending 100 pages at the end, it's just it goes kind of nuts. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great description. So, are you reading and on panels at FantasyCon again this year?
No, this year I decided not to go to any panels. I'm just gonna hang out at the bar, pretty much.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You now know where to find him if you're going to FantasyCon. I'm going, so I will come hang out at the bar with you for some time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I'll be.
So we are now moving on to books that come out this week, because not only does mine come out on Tuesday, but Tanya's Cicada is coming out on Tuesday as well, which is very exciting.
Book birthday buddy!
Book birthday. And we have someone in the audience here who has a book coming out on Tuesday as well. I think I saw that Lily was in the chat earlier. Her Yellow Book of Poetry is coming out Tuesday as well. So Tuesday is a good day, regardless of what genre you're enjoying.
It's a good day. It's a good release day for books.
Obviously, I mean, some of the best books are coming out that day. So
Obviously.
It must be fantastic. I love this book. Tanya's book I've known about since basically you first had the concept.
I know.
And would just be like, what if I did this crazy thing? What if we just had these cicadas? And it was basically just B-movie horror vibes and bugs.
I think it was Amanda actually. See, there we go. I think it was Amanda actually that was just like, if you don't do this, we're not friends anymore.
Yeah, I was like, stop whatever you're doing. Write the book. Yeah, I'm glad you did.
And it's the perfect timing for it with all the cicadas. So you had to
I'm
write
not saying I'm responsible for the double emergence, but I'm not saying it.
As someone who lives in the South, I'm very interested in reading it.
Wait, where are you in the South?
It's Florida.
Okay, I'm in South Carolina. You're in the you're in the South, but like over there. It's like, there's the South and there's Florida.
yeah.
It's like how we divide the states up geographically.
Yeah.
There's the South and then there's Florida,
And Texas. It's like Florida.
Yeah.
The
which
South.
is like bigger than my whole country. So,
It's true.
oh dear. And Tanya's also had other excellent news this week. You just announced your debut
Yay.
novel length story.
I did. What was that? Yeah. So Cicada comes out on Tuesday and we have a book birthday together. Yay. And we didn't even know.
No, like until a week ago.
We kept both getting our dates wrong. So we're just like, wait, mine's Tuesday. Mine's Tuesday. And then I have a novel coming out with Gallery next October called Her Wicked Roots. And then another novel coming out with Gallery in October 26. So, but we're holding the title back on that one for right now.
Teaser.
They know what it is, but they're not telling because
excited.
they're a vault.
Well, we will hear some from Cicada, which is fantastic. And you can all pre-order it in these last couple of days and then get it on Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know, I will say that Cicada is part of the Killer VHS series out of Shortwave, but it is a standalone. They're all standalones except for Candy Cane, which has Candy Cane and Candy Cane Kills, which comes out in December. But Cicada itself is a standalone in the series, and it is about a girl who finds herself stranded at a horror film festival in this remote town in the middle of Mississippi and cannot decide what is worse, the film itself or her gaslighting idiot of a boyfriend. And then she learns fairly quickly that she is actually going to be one of the featured stars in the real life sequel that they are filming. So she has just had a fight with the idiot boyfriend and has stormed off after he's made her look crazy in public again. And there's much cursing. Sorry. Sunglasses in place, arms crossed, not interested in making eye contact or small talk with anyone, Ash marched down the street. She managed to avoid hitting anybody or anything as she made her way back in the direction of the car, but she was fairly certain it was because everyone leapt out of her way for fear of her wrath. She was not a bitch to be messed with, and she made sure her face read, "Fuck right off." She checked her phone with desperation. No bars, no Wi-Fi, no hope. It didn't matter she stormed out of the restaurant like a child. It didn't matter she had let him twist things so she looked crazy again. What mattered was she was in the middle of nowhere with no cell reception, no patience, and no fucks to give. She rounded the laundromat, thinking she might just sulk in the car when she remembered it reeked and the leather seats would cook her legs. She'd have to find somewhere else to cool off. Fuck Richie. If he left her, good riddance. The conifer forest loomed ahead, the dark spires of the pines reaching up into the sky turned to black-tipped darts. The guided hikes. She'd do that. It'd be nice and cool under the trees. People on the internet, yogis and motivational Instagrammers with aesthetically perfect grids were always saying shit like, go touch some grass, as if this was the solution to every problem. Headache? Go touch some grass. Hate your job? Go touch some grass. Dating a dick? Go touch some grass. She'd go touch some grass, or at least walk in the woods. She was pretty sure the two were synonymous in this situation. As she made her way to the park, she saw the parking attendant bending between the cars, checking her phone before looking around, seemingly for a license plate. She did this dance 2 or 3 times, bending and pulling something from her pockets. She wasn't leaving flyers or anything on windshields, and parking was free, so what was she doing? Maybe Richie was right. Maybe she was uptight. Ugh, just the thought of Richie being right about anything made her feel gross. Richie was still a liar, and his use as a crocheted condom, and if she stayed with him, she was likely to end up with a venereal disease or prison time. You get in that car, girl, and you deserve what you get. Dottie's words from the gas station floated back to her. That one's already marked. Marked as what? Stop it, she told herself as she passed the square filled with huge tents selling all kinds of local wares. The big tent in the center was easy to spot, decorated with the dried flower garlands. There were 2 huge black and red canopies covered with those cheap rubber insects hawking merch devoted to that weird-ass cicada movie. Cheesy posters, bug faces on sticks, copies of the VHS. Still VHS. No DVDs. How stuck in time was this town? The entrance to the guided trail was marked by a sign, and she made a beeline for it, shoving her sunglasses to the top of her head as sun turned to shade. The thrum of cicadas and other insects was louder here in the trees, and she was grateful she didn't have to live with it all the time, tickling her eardrums and settling into the back of her skull, putting her on edge. Or maybe she was always on edge. Maybe she really didn't know how to enjoy life without being in control. She kicked at a toadstool with her vans, knocking its head off, the white round ball dotted with tiny tumors sent skittering ahead before hitting a post and shattering into fragments of sponge. A sign marked the trail, a rope hanging across the path, blocking the way, a little wooden notice telling her the next walk would start at 3:30. She'd missed it. Damn it, she said to the bugs in the trees, nails biting into her upper arms as if they were the only thing holding her together. She forced herself to withdraw her claws, rubbing her fingers over the tiny crescent indents she made in her own flesh. You know what? Fuck it. It wasn't like it was private property. Ash stepped over the rope with ease and headed down the trail, sounds of the festival fading as she walked between the trees, pine needles like a carpet on both sides of the path. It was easy going, the way packed hard over the years. Craning her head back, she could just see the tops of the trees high, high above her head, twisting spires of a natural cathedral. Shutting her eyes, she listened to the rattle of the cicadas, a choir of clicking that seemed to vibrate the very air around her head. Ash found her shoulders relaxing, a smile touching her face. She inhaled deeply, tasting pine on her tongue like the purest gin, complemented with the loamy, earthy smell of soil and damp wood. It was nice. So different from the thick, dusty wind pouring through the car or even the recycled, freon-tinged air of the gas stations. There might be something to the whole touching grass thing. Many of the smaller conifers were half dead, trunks thin, their reddish-brown needles hanging from limp, drooping branches. Their bigger brothers and sisters had choked them, stealing the sunlight, leaving them to wither while they grew full and lush. The breeze blew through their tops, and stray needles and the random cone dropped from the canopy like a gentle summer rain. It was all very dreamlike. A perpetual twilight had claimed the forest, putting Ash in mind of old fairy tales. The creepy ones, like Hansel and Gretel or Little Red Riding Hood. Not like she believed in witches or wolves. Well, she believed in wolves, but not like talking wolves plotting elaborate murder sprees dressed in drag. Her fingers trailed across the bark of a tree, feeling the rough scales and the moss growing in thick, pillowy clumps along the trunk. She circled it, ferns and tall grasses brushing against her bare legs, tickling the back of her knees. A few steps further, and she encountered an intricate spider's web spun between 2 arching branches. It sparkled with tiny drops of dew yet to burn off in the heat of the day. The shade too thick, small pearly white clumps dotted the gossamer strands, the day's catch bound in silvery threads to be consumed at the spider's leisure. The spider was nowhere to be seen, perhaps taking an afternoon nap. Her nostrils flared as an odor reached her nose, tickling the fine hairs there. Rot. But not the rot of wood or leaves, but meat. Morbid curiosity had her ducking beneath the web and pushing at the fronds, careful of snakes. The smell was stronger now, and the buzzing of flies filled her ears. A swarm hung low to the ground, hovering over something, a patch of gray and red and white. Ash had to cover her mouth with her hand and take shallow breaths, the smell of death permeating the air and threatening to overwhelm her gag reflex. It was a raccoon, or so she thought. It was kind of hard to tell. The creature had been ripped apart, ribs protruding from the chest cavity, some broken into jagged shards. Its jaw hung open, teeth stained pink, gums receding, a swollen purple tongue falling to the side. The bowels spilled out from the jagged hole in the belly, tubes of purple and blue muscle lying in a tangled heap. Maggots and flies and ants crawled across the surface, feasting upon the offal. The creature's eyes were gone, leaving empty holes of black shadow. Ash told herself the dead thing was not looking at her. It could not look at her, being both dead and without eyes. But the brain is a funny thing, and it registers eyes where it knows eyes belong. It sees eyes even where they do not belong. And even if it doesn't see eyes, it sees acknowledgement. Ash was known, not by a dead maybe raccoon, but something in the woods knew she was there. Once you effectively scare yourself, It's good practice to laugh off your fears. Standing in the woods next to a dead something which may or may not have once been a raccoon or a cat did not seem an appropriate place to laugh. Ash decided it was best to make fun of herself back on the trail. Putting her hand against one of the pines, she heard a faint crunch, yelping as she yanked her fingers back. A bug. She touched a bug. She shuddered, hoping it wasn't planning on stinging her in retaliation. But her mind already registered the sound and texture as too dry, too crisp. She leaned in and realized it looked like a bug, but it wasn't. Well, not anymore. The shell was almost completely intact, save for a thin line cut along the back that looked so precise it could have been cut by a scalpel. She could make out the head and the eyes, the tiny legs and ridges along the belly and back. A husk. The same shape as the cicadas all over town. What had the old man said? They burrowed out of the ground and climbed up onto a tree or a bush to shed their skins. Exoskeleton, she remembered, mimicking the old man's drawl. And she was talking to herself in the woods, staring at a bug's discarded skin while a dead animal was decomposing only feet from her. There was a rustle in the underbrush. Ash leapt back and away from the ground, from the sound, but instead of landing on something solid, the ground beneath her just gave way. Too soft, too spongy. Looking down, Ash found entrails curling around the edges of her shoes. The head of the once maybe raccoon but might have been a cat turned stiffly along with the body as her clumsy feet disturbed it. Empty eye sockets stared up at her accusatory, like she had just added insult to injury. But then the fumes hit her nose and the gnats and flies swarmed her face. Waving her arms and sputtering, Ash darted away from the death and the decay and the barren husk of something soon to die, feeling her stomach churn. There was all manner of ick on her shoe, and her club sandwich was threatening to escape back the way it had gone. Away. She just had to get away. She would walk a bit further and then circle back to the main trail, giving the dead and whatever lurked a wide berth. She tried to pull in air through her mouth, the tingle of rot still lingering. Her shoes. Damn it. She slid her foot back and forth across a root covered with ivy, trying to scrape any of the remaining fluids and gore from her Vans. Wait, what kind of ivy was that? Kudzu? Just kudzu, not poison ivy, right? Oh my God, I just wanted to touch some fucking grass. Still talking to herself out in the woods after having stepped in a pile of dead thing, and now she was going to be eaten by mosquitoes and may have just rubbed herself against poison ivy. Things were great. Nature was awesome. She should do this more. This is fine, she said, the words a puff of air against her lips. I'm going to just walk back on the trail, and I'm going to stop talking to myself now. Neither of those things turned out to be true. After a couple of minutes of walking, Ash had yet to find the path. Fuck you, you stupid trail. She supposed she was actually talking to the trail, but it probably didn't care much. Or it was hiding out of spite. Ash could believe it. She operated quite a bit out of spite. Why wouldn't the trail? Or the woods? Hell, whatever had killed the she was still not convinced it was a raccoon, hadn't eaten it, so maybe it had been killed out of spite. Such thoughts occupied Ash's mind as she walked. Did animals murder each other, or was that purely a human thing? Animals killed over things like food and territory and mates. Wasn't that kind of murdery? Was murdery a word? When did she get so morbid? She was trying to distract herself from the plain and simple fact she was lost. The conifers grew denser, their tops reaching dizzying heights. She passed a tree struck by lightning, the inside hollowed out, black, charred wood still visible all along its trunk. It had burned from the inside, another empty husk. Ash rubbed her arms, willing away the psychosomatic tricks her mind and body were playing on her. She did not feel spiders in her hair. She was not covered in mosquitoes. There were no eyes watching her. She needed to think of something, anything, to take her mind off how scared she was starting to get. She was not lost in the woods. Nobody got lost in the woods these days. If you go down in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise, she sang, something in her brain triggering the old song. If you go down in the woods today, you better prepare to die. Jesus, brain, what is wrong with you? Before she threw her Hail Mary, she palmed her phone once more. Nothing, which meant there was only one course left. She was going to yell for help. She was fed up, and her pride could just go right ahead and get fucked. Richie could laugh at her all he wanted, because his opinion mattered fuck all anyway, so she was going to stand right there and yell for help. Just pick a direction and start screaming. Orienting herself in the direction of where she thought Revelation lay, Ash opened her mouth to yell, but stopped. A tree stood just a little alone, like the rest of the forest was giving it a bit of a birth. A huge growth descended from the trunk, the top just slightly above her own head. It was brown and strange, nothing like the bark of the tree itself, but smooth. She stepped closer, wanting a better look because her curiosity was as much of a bitch as she was, obviously. As she neared, Ash saw the growth was some carving of a massive cicada husk. It was just like the one she had touched earlier, only so much bigger. The head was slightly more humanoid in shape, but the giant eyes still protruded round and globe-like. The artistry was incredible. The wood shaped and painted to look like the dried parchment of an exoskeleton. Thick leg stalks were stuck to the pine bark seamlessly. Ash instinctively opened her camera app and snapped some pictures. Backed up to get a shot of the forest behind, she nearly fell into a hole, pinwheeling her arms to keep her balance. Someone had dug a huge pit near the tree straight down into the earth. Huh. She looked at the cicada and then back into the hole, thinking maybe it was a tourist spot. Guides probably brought groups of pictures on nature walks to take pictures with the big bug. A local nature geek would show how cicadas buried themselves and tunneled out after years and years before they crawled up a tree just like this and latched on. But why was there no path? Why carve something so meticulously and beautifully horrifying in the middle of the woods? And why was it so quiet? It took Ash a moment to realize she'd only heard herself breathing, too hard and too fast. It took her a longer moment to recognize what was missing was the hum of cicadas. Like an ambient noise you only miss when it's gone. You don't realize just how loud it is until you don't hear it. Its absence making you slightly uneasy. Or a lot uneasy in her case. Ash licked at her lips, approaching the carving on the tree, but as she reached out a hand to touch a spot along the spine, she had the same feeling of being watched as before. Arm extended, fingers poised to touch, Ash froze. She stared at it for what felt like minutes, lids wide, eyes going dry. Nothing happened, but just like the okay, maybe it really was a raccoon with its empty eye sockets, she felt known. Fine, she said aloud to the carving and the woods because they were never going to tell on her, and even if they did, she would deny it. Richie was right. It moved. Ash was too terrified to scream, but not so terrified she didn't snatch her hand back as if burned. Something had moved inside the husk. It was a husk. It was not a carving. A jerk from within, what was most certainly not a carving. She didn't scream. She ran.
There's a wonderful mix of humorous and just grotesquely horrible.
Yay, camp.
And who knew we were getting singing tonight? So I should mention that there are links at the bottom here for everybody reading tonight, so that you can add things on Goodreads, buy books, follow people on social media. It's all in the little description section.
Yay.
So I am going to read from Reawakening, which is coming out on Tuesday, which is book 1.5. It's a collection of short stories set just after The Hiding, but other than the first one, you don't have to have read The Hiding first. There's no spoilers, really. And last time I read from the main character's point of view, one of her stories, Harper's. And this time I am reading from a new point of view character, who's Zero, our second Zero of the day. And I'm starting partway through his first story. So the important things to know are that Zero is a cat. He is a white Turkish Angora, to be specific, and he is very proud of that fact. He is also extremely intelligent and extremely magical. He's also very, very hungry. So he has stopped on the way back from his very important magical mission to fish. But because he does not like water, he has drawn a summoning circle on the banks of the river instead, so that the fish will flop out to him. As Zero got started on his second course, the circle glowed again. I should erase that. Or I could eat more fish. It's water, it'll dry soon. Until then, I get fish. I like fish. His master's call was more insistent, tinged with irritation, but wasting life force was against his master's ethos. So, really, he was doing the right thing by eating more. A third fish, larger than the previous two put together, flopped up onto the shore. Zero's eyes lit up. He pounced on his catch, licking his lips in anticipation. His hunger somewhat abated by his first two catches, Zero flipped the fish aside and stalked after it. As it flapped ineffectually, he pawed at it, and it smacked him in the face with its tail. Zero jumped back with a curse, rubbing his bruised nose. He pounced on the fish again and pinned it to the ground. It flailed at him with ragged fins, unable to escape. Strange noises issued from its mouth. Zero paused in confusion. Then something hard hit him in the stomach. This was not normal fish behavior. Ears flat against his head, Zero backed away. The creature before him could hardly be called a fish upon closer examination. Although it had the body of a fish, two knobbly legs sprouted from its midsection, and it had frog-like webbed feet. It used its fins to push itself up, standing unsteadily, and turned to stare at Zero. Puffing out its chest, it curled its fins into a fist and shook it at him. Zero hissed softly, taking a tentative swipe at the creature. It was slow, and made no move to retaliate, but its shouting grew louder. Zero had no idea what it was saying, but he could guess the gist. Keeping his body between the fish with legs and the water, Zero advanced upon his prey. With a sudden leap, he bowled it over and closed his teeth over its throat. It was heavy and almost as big as he was, but also slippery enough to slide across the rock easily. Zero dragged it into the bushes. He hated himself for what he was doing, but his master's wishes were inescapable, and he could no more disobey than he could fly. He scratched irritably at his collar. Magical energy crackled from it, coursing up and down Zero's spine, sending impulses lancing through his brain. When his master made a command inescapable, there was no leeway. Most were simple, and he could break or bend them if he was careful. But this was a command of blood magic. Supernaturals unknown to us must be brought to me. No one could exist in their community without his master's permission. Pinning the creature underneath him, Zero tapped the air 3 times with his paw, and a portal of swirling violet and silver appeared. Zero nudged the creature through, then followed. Time and space folded, scrunched, and unfurled. He emerged in a massive hall with stone colonnades and a cold flagstone floor upon which the fish with legs lay whimpering. Zero turned his head away, an uncat-like prickle of tears in his eyes. He wished he'd never cast the summoning circle. Greedy cat, selfish cat. Heart hurting more with every step, he nudged the creature forward with his nose. Flicking torchlight illuminated what most visitors to the castle took to be tapestries. Zero knew better. The images lacked corporeal substance, being nothing more than light and shadow woven together. Yet their purpose was anything but decorative. The landscapes varied from gently rolling countryside to elegant Gothic cityscapes, all exuding a serenity belied by the figures of humans and animals within them writhing in pain, their contorted smiles a mask unable to hide the horror in their eyes. The torchlight likewise cast Zero's shadow, and that of his prey, as grotesque jerky mimicries twining in and out of the pillars. At one end of the hall was a raised dais with a single throne and a tall table with a crystal ball of teal water. One of the throne's arms supported a deep purple cushion. My place at my master's side. Zero kept his eyes on the ground, unable to look without pride and revulsion clashing. He crawled towards the throne, prodding his prey ahead of him. Prey. Hunting to eat was natural, but this turned his stomach. The fish that had so delighted him earlier now rose in acid chunks to clog his throat. He kept his head down, ears flat and belly low to the floor. Ignoring his master's call was always trouble, but it had been his first solo trip outside in weeks, probably his last for several more. There would be no sunlight, just cold castle walls and darkness. I deserve no better. If I'd only come back, I wouldn't be in trouble, and neither would this fish. My fault. Bad cat. When Zero reached the bottom step to the dais, a black void sparkling with starlight swirls materialized above the throne. Darkness dripped like rain, streaking into a shadowed humanoid form. Starlight and void masked the figure's face. Their voice was multitonal, and at the sound of the tapestry figures' mouths gaped in silent screams. A gift, Zero, to temper my disappointment. Do I not feed you, Zero? I give you what is best for you. You know this. Too much clouds your judgment and makes you lazy. We have too much work to do for that. Too many people relying on us, do we not? Zero bowed and mewed softly. Greedy cat, lazy cat, letting everyone down again. He glanced across at the fish who cowered on the floor in front of his master. Especially you. I'm sorry. Hiding his regret, Zero trotted up the steps to take his place at the foot of his master's throne, and was rewarded with a pat on the head. Despite my sorrow at your actions, Zero, I am intrigued by the gift. Shall we see where this fine specimen comes from? His master descended to stand before the captive creature. Drawing a sharp knife, he leant over, and the fish gave a little cry. Zero closed his eyes, a paw across his face. When he dared crack an eye open again, the fish with legs was sitting, trembling, on the floor, and his master was standing by the basin, watching the fish's blood drip from the knife into the water. Zero joined his master, balancing on the bowl's plinth to peer in curiously. An image formed of a rudimentary settlement on the banks of a river. Other strange fish creatures walked between wooden huts. A few carried basic tools and weapons, others ushered their young in front of them, and some paused in small groups, talking speedily in their garbled, bubbly language. An overwhelming fishy smell rose from the basin, and Zero licked his lips again. Greedy cat, his master scolded. Did you not feast enough at the river? Must I teach you a lesson for your betterment yet again? I am a busy soul, yet I must constantly pause my work to teach you. Zero cringed back, eyes rolled away, ears flat, the tip of his tail twitching. He mewed again, trying to convey his sorrow and plead with his master not to harm his find, not to punish some other sentient soul for Zero's own bad behavior. His master chuckled and patted his head. It was a good summoning circle. I will teach you how to be more specific in the future. Yet something interesting came as your failure. Come, Zero. Let us return our little friend to his village. They will be missing him. Relief and gratitude for his master's leniency flooded Zero, and his trembling lessened. He isn't angry. Disappointed, yes, but not angry. He mewed his sank softly. His master rarely decided to let captive Gentlesen go once he had them within their castle walls. Its return shall show us a path to them, his master added, and Zero flinched. He picked up the fish with legs and brought it over to the bowl. It looked down at its village in silence before looking up into the swirling void mask. It spoke slowly, its tone pleading. Zero couldn't watch. He bared his teeth, a little chitter escaping, until the tip of the blade dug into the base of his tail. He closed his mouth, desperately trying to swallow the burning bile in his throat. His master lowered the fish into the basin, and it swiftly dived to the bottom of the deep water. The image rippled, then cleared. The fish with legs was surrounded by a group of its fellows, all talking excitedly. When his master turned away, the image vanished. Ze clicked their fingers, and Zero dropped down to the floor to follow Ze out of the hall, to whatever lesson awaited him. I'm done. So, yeah, that was a little bit of Zero there for anyone who hasn't already met him on Twitter.
I love the kitty.
Yeah.
I know, he's got such a little fan club, bless him. So in a few weeks, when more people have had a chance to read it, I shall do a poll and see whether Heresy still has top fan slots.
I was gonna say, are we gonna?
They already hate each other, so how they meet in the Somnia is not very nice. Which I'm editing at the moment, so you'll get to see that next March. So that is everything from us here today. Thank you so much to all of you for coming and reading and joining me to celebrate the release of Reawakening and Cicada.
But Reawakening, yay! Yay!
Yay, books coming out on Tuesday. I am going to hang around for a minute because I got a book parcel today that I'm going to open while I'm here, but it's up to people whether they want to stay or go or see what's in the parcel or whatever. So I have a box which is going to make me disappear, which means that anyone hanging around gets to see my weird wall behind me when I take off the background screen. There we go. This is my wall of notes and plotting and various other things that takes up the entirety of this space. So I think this box is from Lamia, and those of you who came to Tuesday's reading will have seen or heard her read from Wingspan of Treason, and I think I've got a lot of packing peanuts. There is packing peanuts, straw, and paper in this. She has packed it to be safe. Do I have a book in here? Ooh. So, it feels like a big chunky book. I'm afraid anyone who's getting swag from me, it's not going to be as fancy as Lamia's swag.
It's very hard to beat that.
Like, I feel bad opening it. And go, okay. Here we go. And she has also done all the art herself, just to give you a little glimpse inside. Whoops, I just saw another one. See, they're all different. She has literally spent probably years doing this.
Yeah.
So what else is in the big exciting box? Oh, we have a shiny bookmark. I think some stickers in this one. Let me open this. And some kind of paper with a feather that's all wrapped up. I feel like I'm getting some kind of special secret mission.
You better take a picture of it or you're going to be mad that you didn't.
True. I don't have a camera because my phone is my camera and I don't have a phone. But no, like,
all right. There you go.
Screen.
Screenshot later.
You watch, she's knotted this really tightly. I don't want to rip it. Hang on, I think I can slightly, there we go. So we have 3 mystery papers. Oh my goodness. Where's my camera? I'm going to have to frame these. These are incredible.
She did all of these herself.
Mm-hmm. It's just insanely talented. And then, oh, we have a third map. The amount of detail, I don't know how well you can see that border. Can I bring it up to the... Just like the amount of detail on these is incredible. I feel like I'm one of those QVC ads, but wait, there's more. Tea to enjoy with the book. More tea, cookies.
She knows you.
More cookies. I am well set. I'm just going to be sitting and reading, and I do have to at some point remember I have a 2-year-old who probably doesn't want me to sit and read. Maybe that's what the cookies are for. I'd like distract my 2-year-old so I can read. More cookies. She's literally just sent me like half a store of cookies here. This is great. I think that is everything. So I am so chuffed with these maps. I would have bought these maps from her to hang in my house. This is so amazing. So pretty. There's my box of goodies from Lamia. So if you have not already gone and ordered her book, then you should do so, because you can just to look at the pretty illustrations. I'm sure the words are amazing too. They were on Tuesday, but it's just so pretty. Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you for reading and celebrating with me. I love you all.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Congratulations.
Bye, audience.